This one's wife. Donations fall off a cliff. Oh dear. This is what happens when you are unpopular. This is what happens when you're largely disliked. This is what happens when more and more people see through what you are. Martin Robinson, of the Daily Mail, leads with the headline, Harry and this one's wife's Archewell Foundation suffers £8.7 million drop in donations. It's a fairly hefty drop. The Sussex's charity received £1.6 million from two wealthy benefactors last year, with losses hitting £537,000 as boss James Holt pockets a £133,000 pay rise. Donations to Prince Harry and this one's wife's Archewell Foundation have plunged by $11 million, £8.7 million, in the past year, sending it into the red. Well, so much for Princess Popular, You would have thought that as a consequence of how well she's loved around the world, that those donations would be flowing in. The fact is that the donations have dropped by an astonishing $11 million. And the profit from 2021 has evaporated, quite simply, owing to a lack of donations. The Archewell Foundation recorded a loss of $674,485 for last year because revenue was $2 million but costs were $2.67 million. Last year, there were only two major donors, giving around $1 million each. The year before, an unidentified wealthy donor gave them $10 million, but there was no repeat of that in 2022. So whoever that was clearly thought to themselves, I didn't really get the benefit that I was expecting, or has thought, there's no way that I'm going to make a donation to these two grifters. Fuck knows where the money actually goes to. What is interesting, amongst many other things, is that the revenue was only $2 million coming from just two people. That's right, just two people. I'm pretty certain that if you would look at many other foundations and charities, they would receive some significant donations, perhaps as a consequence of a legacy in a will, that the trust or the foundation, the charity is a beneficiary. But usually you would have lots of small donations from the general public, chipping in $5 here, $10 here, $100 here, whatever it might be. There's none of that with Archewell, which demonstrates quite neatly this. They're wholly unpopular, and no one is minded to want to make a donation from the general public. But what then of the sugars? I hear you ask. HG, surely they would be reaching into their piggy banks, into their purses to extract some cash dollars to contribute to the might of Archewell. Well, it would appear that that's not the case. And you might ask, well, how so? Haven't they got legions of supporters that spend plenty of time on Twitter attacking people needlessly? To that, I offer you two observations. The first is, the socio-economic group that the Sugars occupies is not particularly well off, and these individuals, quite simply, are wanting to be paid by the Sussexes to do what they do, rather than make any donations. They simply cannot afford to do it, because many of them are running around on the bones of their arse. Secondly, the Sugars is not as large a group as many people would think. Their ranks are inflated by the presence of bots, and they're a vocal group, but a small group. You often see the same names popping up again and again in their vitriolic support of the Sussexes, and therefore it creates an impression of a lot of noise. But if you actually spent some time looking at this, you'll see that the group is actually rather small and is undoubtedly dwindling in numbers. Accordingly, a combination of a small potential donor group to begin with and one that doesn't really have any money means that the donations simply aren't going to come from there. As for the rest of the public, they're just simply not going to donate because they don't like the Sussexes based upon their behaviours. Accordingly, the income has come in two $1 million drops. The report continues by explaining that the Sussexes have released their charity's annual report and a glitzy promotional film showing their good works in 2023, but it also emerged that the finances have dived. It follows a tumultuous year for the couple, which saw Harry's vitriolic memoir Spare top the bestseller lists, but their personal popularity ratings tumble. They were also the subject of ridicule by popular television shows such as South Park and Family Guy, lambasted after claims about a reportedly near-catastrophic car chase in New York, and lost their lucrative podcast deal with Spotify, where one senior executive labelled them fucking grifters. The couple set up their Archwell Foundation after quitting the royal family, and say it is an impact-driven global non-profit that puts compassion into action, which is committed to a simple but profound mission: show up, do good. Well, I think it ought to be show up, milk it for all it's worth. The foundation employed 5 people with salaries totaling $640,441. Harry and this one's wife did not take a salary. Ooh, isn't that good of them? Though I wouldn't be surprised to find that they expensed certain items through Archwell in terms of travel and security and so forth. Apparently, Executive Director James Holt, considered the Sussex's right-hand man since Megxit, he was paid $227,000 a year, which included a $20,000 bonus. This was around a $170,000 pay rise. The money's got to go somewhere, hasn't it, huh? And why not ensure that a flunky receives it? Holt's 2021 salary did not reflect a full 12 months of work because he joined in the middle of the year, it's understood. Despite the loss in 2022, it appears that the foundation, described as a non-profit organisation, still holds around $8.3 million in cash and assets. The charity still has reserves available, and an Archwell spokesperson contested Holt's pay rise. The spokesperson said the account showed the charity was doing well and managed its finances aptly and would likely have millions to spend each year. Seems a little bit vague, doesn't it? I'm likely to have millions to spend each year. High-profile foundations sometimes receive a large amount of funding in the first year, which is then used over the course of several years. If a foundation already has a large amount of money in the bank, this may lead them to reduce future fundraising. Yes, this all sounds like excuse-making, namely, we are drastically unpopular, nobody's given us any money apart from 2 donors lumping in $1 million each, and so we're going to have to come up with some excuses to nullify this threat to control. The fact is that the donations have fallen off a cliff. This is as a consequence of the rampant unpopularity of the Sussexes. This amounts to a threat to control. This one's wife sees herself as popular, and for the donations to drop in such a way clearly demonstrates that she's not popular. Naturally, her narcissism will not allow that to compute, and instead, she will have to come up with excuses such as, oh, we don't need to do any fundraising because there's already money in the bank. Or, more likely with her, this is a fuck-up from you, Harry. If you'd have kept your mouth shut and Spare, we wouldn't suffer this dip in our popularity. This one's wife can't see that it's her behaviour that causes this. It's somebody else's fault. The typical blame shifting will occur. What do people below the line think? Aqua Emperor writes, finally some good news in the paper. It happens so rarely. Male fan, it couldn't have happened to a nicer couple. The power of love. This charity has been built as an ego trip for these two, and they obviously believe their famous friends would donate. With all the negative press, the Hollywood lot will be pedaling backwards fast. I always support small local charities that desperately need funding. ER9. Why would wealthy people donate to a charity that doesn't seem to do anything or provide any service other than for tax deduction purposes? M's. We need to see how much of what was donated has been used for expenses and a breakdown of exactly what the expenses were. Indeed, as you know, because it's based in Delaware, 95% can be used for expenses in relation to the money, and therefore the sense of entitlement and lack of accountability of this one's wife means that it's undoubtedly the case that much of the expenses that she racks up will be driven through Archwell, ensuring that it's other people's money that are funding her and it's not off the basis of money that she has earned. The figures don't lie. There's been a huge drop-off in donations. This has been as a consequence of the unpopularity of this one's wife, yet once again, her narcissism will prevent her from accepting that it's her fault. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.